Hi, this is Beersborn. Welcome back to Art History. In this chapter, we're continuing our look at global traditions. Specifically, we're looking at the Pacific Islands. The Pacific Islands are a group of islands in the Pacific Ocean. They're typically grouped into three groups: Polynesia, Micronesia, and Melanesia. We're going to start with a piece that comes from the Melanesian island of Papua New Guinea. And it's known as the Ambum Stone. The Ambum Stone is a prehistoric work of art. It's the oldest example that we have of art that comes from these Pacific Island cultures. So let's start by taking a look at the content. The subject matter of this sculpture, it's obviously a little creature of some kind. The belief is that it's most likely a depiction of an anteater, or more specifically, an echidna. An echidna is a type of anteater. It's small and spiny, kind of round, has an elongated snout. And you might look at this sculpture and not see a lot of connection between the actual echidna and the depiction we see here. But if we look at a baby echidna, like this guy, they're pretty similar. There are some theories that maybe even the sculpture is a depiction of an echidna embryo while still in the egg. Echidnas are unique. They're one of the few mammals that lay eggs rather than giving birth to live young. So while still in the egg, the echidna embryo looks very similar to the Ambum Stone. Now, echidnas were a source of food for ancient and prehistoric people on the Pacific Islands. Their bodies have a lot of meat with a high fat content, kind of similar to a pig. So a lot of ancient cultures, a lot of prehistoric cultures would rely on echidnas for food. Now let's talk about the form. This sculpture is made out of stone. Specifically, it's made out of greywack. Greywack is a hard stone, and if we look at the sculpture, there's a lot of what's called negative space. There's a lot of emptiness in the sculpture. The sculptor who made this went through a lot of effort to carve out the entire inner section of the sculpture to create the snout that hangs down and the round belly. Greywack is a hard stone, so in order to sculpt something that has so much negative space, where so much of the material has been chipped away through the subtractive process, it means that a lot of work went into this. There's also a pretty high level of detail, with the eye and a pupil in it, a little hint of the ear, the arms and the legs of the animal, even the details of the nostrils at the end of the snout. So we can assume that the function must have been something important. Like all prehistoric work, we're missing a lot of the context. So we don't know exactly why or how this was made, but we can assume that it must have been something important because of the amount of work that went into making it. Now, the function that we assume for this object is that it was most likely either some kind of ritual object connected to, maybe religion, or more likely, it was perhaps part of a mortar and pestle. A mortar and pestle is a tool. We still use them today for making like guacamole. If you have a small stone bowl with a stone piece that's used to ground up food inside of it, that's a mortar and pestle. Many prehistoric and ancient cultures use these to prepare food. The mortar is the bowl, and the pestle is the piece of stone, usually a hard stone that's used to grind up the food inside of the mortar. So most likely this object was a pestle, which kind of explains the shape too. We have a rounded bottom that would be perfect for grinding, and we have this skinnier part which would be easy to grip with the hand. The head of the echidna would kind of wrap around the hand to give you extra grip. Now with context, we don't know much. Like I mentioned, this work of art is prehistoric, meaning that it predates written record. What we do know are some important events that have happened to it somewhat recently. The Ambum Stone was discovered on Papua New Guinea, and it ended up in a museum in Australia. In the year 2000, the Ambum Stone was loaned from that Australian museum to a museum in France. And while it was in the French museum, it was dropped. When they dropped it, it broke in half, which was a terrible tragedy. But it did have a silver lining. When the stone split, it revealed a small piece of plant material that had been wedged into a tiny crack inside the Ambum Stone, back when this was used in prehistory. And the reason why that's important is because it allowed scientists to radiocarbon date the stone. With radiocarbon dating, it's a very accurate way of dating something that's very, very old, but you need to have some kind of material that was once living. You can't just radiocarbon date stone. So we didn't really know when the Ambum Stone was from until it broke, and we found that little piece of plant fiber that allowed it to be dated back to 1500 BCE, which officially made this the oldest example of art from a Pacific Island culture. Now, the Ambum Stone was glued back together and returned to Australia, where you can still see it today. And that's the Ambum Stone. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.